Afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining. Before I do the entire introduction, just a reminder, this CLE is being recorded. If you do not want to be on camera, you may leave right now. Otherwise, just please smile. My name is Alexandra Kleinfeld. I am the co-chair of the ADR practice section together with Ann Dalton. And I am a certified circuit civil and family and county mediator and a qualified arbitrator. We are very pleased to have Dr. Laura Streyffeler presenting for us today. I'm actually very grateful. I already told her that it's very hard to come by interpersonal violence training materials. So thank you so much for joining. And just a little bit of information about Dr. Laura Streyffeler. She's a licensed mental health counselor, and she's also a board certified expert in traumatic stress and is a diplomate of the American Academy of Experts in Traumatic Stress in collaboration with the National Center of Crisis Management. Dr. Laura is listed in the National Registry of the American Academy of Experts in Traumatic Stress, and she's a member of the Premier Speakers Bureau of the National Center for Crisis Management. Additionally, she is a credentialed expert in domestic violence and forensic counseling by the American Academy of Forensic Counselors. She's also a state of Florida certified clinical supervisor. Dr. Laura has been working with victims of domestic, both intimate partners and family violence, sexual violence, which includes sexual assault, rape, adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse, assault, incest, and human trafficking, and survivors of other types of trauma for over 25 years. Dr. Laura authored...
35.
Oh, 35 now. Oh,
no, I probably
sorry.
wrote 5, I guess, but, I was thinking it's like, actually, it's almost 40. I'm like, oh my God, how did I get...
Okay, so as you can see, a lot of experience for sure. So thank you for that.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt my bad manners.
No, we are here very informally. We are eager to learn from you, so thank you for that. And actually, you authored the book Wife Beater Shirt Optional. There's no dress code for domestic violence. It's a book about myths, truths, and misconceptions about domestic and sexual violence. And just recently, you authored How to Have a Healthy Relationship in an Unhealthy World. Both books are available on Amazon, so I really suggest you check it out. I know that Dr. Streyffeler is very well versed, and it's always great to hear and read from her. So I'm turning it over to Dr. Laura right now. I appreciate everyone for being here, and especially Dr. Laura for presenting. So please go ahead, and I will start the PowerPoint. Just bear with me.
Well, I will say when we start the presentation, there are a couple of basics that every time you go to a domestic violence training, you have to have because the law requires it. And I know everyone goes, oh, no, not this again. So we're going to go through that as quickly as we can. So we meet the requirements. But really what I want to talk to you about is, domestic violence as it relates to parenting. Can we don't need the title. Can we go to the second slide there with the little girl with the doll?
Yes, just a second. It's still trying to load, so bear with me. Okay. Yep.
Oh. Okay, well, I think if you have what I have on my screen, the three of us, you can't really see, but the little girl is holding a doll. And it says, I want my baby to be safe. And I put this up here because this is one of the reasons that I chose to talk about parenting as it relates to domestic violence. Back in the 80s, when I first started working in the shelter, it was the late 80s, but it was still the 80s. A lot of people would donate dolls and stuffed animals. And back then it was just moms, but when the moms would come in with kids, we'd give them dolls or stuffed animals or whatever. And this one little girl got a doll, and she and her mom had been at the shelter for a couple of days, and then mom decided that she was going to go home. And this little girl loved the doll, and it was her baby, and she carried it around, and she was such a good little mommy. And then her mother was ready to go, and she was doing, I call it the mommy drag, kind of grabbing her by the arm with her fingers, in her arm and saying, come on, let's go, let's go. And the little girl was going, no, mommy, no, I don't want to go. I want to stay here. And she's like, no, we're leaving. Come on. And the little girl was really fighting her mom, and really, yeah, I'm just talking slowly because I'm reliving the memory. And they were in the hall right on the way to go out. And one of the most poignant things I've ever seen in my whole life, and I've seen a lot of stuff, I've been doing this a long time. The little girl turned around with the doll and handed it to the children's counselor and said, here, please take my baby. I want her to be safe. And they walked out the door. And, you can't make a story like that up. And I don't think there's a story that illustrates more how important it is to really understand, some of the dynamics of domestic violence and what it's like, not just for, your client, but the whole situation, and really looking at the whole situation and understanding the dynamics. Because at the end of the day, the dynamics is no child should have to grow up in a home where he or she doesn't feel safe. Okay, next slide. When we talk about what domestic violence is, years ago, I was teaching at FGCU in the criminal justice program. And, one of the things that became very obvious to me was really the difference between the legal definition, and you're going to get a copy of the PowerPoint. I'm not going to sit here and read this to you. You're all hooked on phonics, you can read. But the legal definition is really what you can get arrested for. And, a lot of the physical, the sexual, the stalking, and that is domestic violence. But really, clinically, what domestic violence is, it's behavior where one partner uses one or more of the different types of abuse that we're going to talk about in a second to control his or her partner. It's really about one person having all the control in the relationship. Legally, sometimes both partners may be violent. Both partners may say not nice things to each other, may be verbally or emotionally abusive to each other. But really, when we're talking about domestic violence, true domestic violence, we're talking about not feeling safe in your household and feeling like you have no control. And just that sense of hopelessness and helplessness over your own life, that somebody else has more control over your life than you do. Next slide. And y'all know, the mental, psychological, emotional, the difference between mental and psychological and emotional is mental is on your head, is, the crazy making, all you have to do is go on social media and you see the term, gaslighting. Gaslighting is a form of psychological abuse, making somebody think that they're crazy or they're going crazy. It comes from a film in 1946 called Gaslight. It's on YouTube. It's a black and white film. It's a great film. If you haven't seen it, you should watch it. I mean, even if you're not really, domestic violence isn't your thing, it's still a really good movie. Emotional abuse is on your heart, is on your feelings, is on your self-esteem. You worthless fat piece of shit. It's a good thing I'm with you, because nobody would want your sorry ass. The physical, and again, physical you can be arrested for, and people really identify that, especially with a lot of your professional clients or your you know, high income clients. I had a client call himself the other day a mega earner. You know, people that think of themselves in a different class of people, and, you know, believe the myths and misconceptions that domestic violence happens in trailer parks and their partners wear wife beater shirts. You know, a lot of times you don't see the physical violence because they know that they can get arrested for it. Or if there is physical violence, the bruises are always put in a place that they can't be seen. By the time they get to the face, the lethality goes up. Sexual violence in a relationship, whether, you know, somebody's married or not, no still means no. If somebody's forcing their partner to do something that they don't want to do, because it's a way to dominate them. And I'm not talking about people that are free will choice in BDSM relationships, and, you know, they're choosing free will consent, choosing somebody to be dominant. I'm talking about somebody that's trying to prove to their partner that they have more control and they're going to do something that they're not comfortable with. I had a client in here yesterday who had a partner, actually a husband, that was doing things to her that she was not comfortable with, she was afraid of, she was disgusted by. They were very, to her, very, well, to a lot of people, very degrading behaviors, and he was doing them to sexually turn himself on, even though it gave her no pleasure at all. That's a form of sexual abuse. Financial, controlling all the money, not letting a partner have access to money or tracking them through credit cards. Environmental, the biggest one we see here is isolation, separating somebody from their support system so they have nobody to hold on to but their partner. And the last one is a destruction of property or pets, throwing things, breaking things, kicking Fido, you know, with the message that this time, you know, it's the dog or the picture of, you know, your grandmother just died. The next time it'll be you. And part of it is to make it look like it's all anger. Again, these are the different types. I'm sure you've all seen the power and control wheel, so I'm not gonna, you know, go through it. The other thing that's really important to remember is that abuse is a pattern of behavior. Again, when we look at the clinical, yes, you could be arrested for domestic violence if you're married and somebody gets physically violent once, but when we're talking about, you know, abuse in a relationship, we're talking about a pattern of behavior where it's used to control another partner. Generally, by the time there's physical violence, there's already been emotional and mental violence. Now, the one type of abuse you don't see on here, this probably isn't going to make me very popular, but I really don't care, is narcissist abuse. Okay, this is the word that we're seeing, you know, every half hour, and much more often if you're on the internet. You know, narcissist abuse has become a trendy term, and it could be, you know, severe psychological or mental abuse. But a lot of times I'm seeing it, you know, just because your partner is an asshole or does something, you know, not nice, doesn't mean that they're a narcissist. And when somebody does something in a relationship where the other person doesn't like it, I have people coming in, it used to be their partner was always bipolar. Now, I mean, almost everybody that I see that's having trouble in their relationship says, you know, I'm dating or I'm married to a narcissist. You know, I think that's highly unlikely. So, you know, that to me is a big red flag. I always want to know more. If somebody's labeling their partner before you even talk about things, you want to know specific examples. Well, what type of things are they doing? Are you afraid? You know, if they believe that they're really going crazy, they're not crazy, because people that are really crazy don't think they're crazy. They just think you don't get it. So if somebody's talking to you and saying, oh my God, I'm really afraid, I'm afraid for the kids, I'm going crazy, I'm losing my mind, they might be overwhelmed, they might be depressed, they might be anxious, but they're probably not crazy. Okay, next. And again, you've seen this, it's all over the internet, the power and control wheel. The other thing I put on here, because I wanted to show you the next one, is there's also for gay and lesbian relationships, there's another power and control wheel. If you can go to the next slide, you know, where partners, especially with partners that are still in the closet, or may have jobs where they're afraid of losing their jobs or being outed to their families or different things. There is a power and control wheel that's more geared towards gay and lesbian relationships, and the dynamics are very similar. But there are a couple additional issues that people in the LGBTQIA community deal with, especially accessing help and dealing with potential helpers that aren't as LGBTQIA friendly. Perhaps they've had a bad experience with law enforcement or with a counselor or an attorney. Again, in this day and age, it's a lot better. With some of the political climate, I've seen more and more people starting to go back in the closet, or aren't quite as out because they're afraid of consequences. Next. Again, this is the last of the textbook slides. The cycle of violence, you know, everybody has pretty much seen this. The first stage is your tension building stage, where you're walking on eggshells, you have your emotional and mental abuse, you know, something's going to happen, you just don't know when it's going to happen or what's going to happen. And then it doesn't necessarily have to be a battering where somebody's beaten up or physically abused, but there's some type of blow up, there's some type of horrific incident. And then after that, the abusive partner knows he or she has gone too far, and they honeymoon, which I call sucking up, because they're going to do whatever it takes to make sure their partner doesn't go anywhere. The new term that's being used now is hoovering, you know, to suck you back in. Nothing sucks like Electrolux, but, you know, they call it hoovering. And, you know, in most of them, when we used to draw them, and I just took this one off the internet, but I usually put denial in the middle. And if you look, DENIL, don't even know I am lying. And that's when they're in denial, saying, this is the person I fell in love with, they're never going to do it again, they're really sorry, we have kids together, we're going to make it work. And that lasts until the person knows that the relationship isn't going to break up, and then they move back into the tension building stage, and the circle goes around and round. And as the relationship goes on, the honeymoon stage gets shorter and shorter, because the person that's abusive knows their partner has been so beaten down emotionally, mentally, maybe so afraid. You know, there's an expression, victims are beaten down long before they're ever beaten up. That the honeymoon stage is much shorter. Okay, next slide. I went through that as quick as I can. Let's start with the parenting. I put on the top when none of them are your type. You know, everyone has a type. I want to start by talking about the different types of abusive partner parents. Originally, Ted Bundy, Lundy Bancroft, a little Freudian slip there. Lundy Bancroft, who's written a book, The Better as a Parent, and has written Why Does He Do That? And back in the day had done a lot of worked for 15 years in better intervention programs, created, you know, talked about the batterer as a parent, the victim as a parent. So some of what I'm going to show you has to do with some of the things that they said. I will tell you that it was a long time ago. He said only fathers. I added mothers, because gender roles have changed so much that it's not necessarily, we're going to just talk about the different types. The first type of is the authoritarian parent, parents who are the I can't, I can't really read it, so I'll just have to discuss it. Other parents who are intolerant of everything, it's my way or the highway, and they see their child as possessions. We see that a lot in divorces and different things when you have, it's my time. How many times have you been, if you're in family law and you've been working a divorce and one parent says, well, the kids can't talk to the other parent during, my days because those are my days and they're my children, even if they may have the children at the grandparents' house or whatever. They think this is my days, my kids, my time. I always say my boat, my golf clubs, my kids, kind of all in the same thing. And they use the kids as far as a possession, and I'm going to do what I want because they belong to me, and don't really, parent and look at their partner or their children as people, their possessions. Next slide. The irresponsible, neglectful, or under-involved. A lot of times this is parents that have, that will, with the rewards of parents, wait a minute, hold on, let me just, sorry, I want to kind of just be true to what this says, and I did put it, let me just see, hold on, I apologize. I usually don't use these kind of things, I talk off the top of my head. Expect challenge with rewards of parenting without the challenges. So basically, the truth is some kids are easier to raise than others, but they want their kid to be, an Einstein and, the prima ballerina at the Nutcracker, and they see their child as a reflection of them and basically want a trophy child. And they only want to be there when things are good and things are easy, and look at how great my kid is, and don't want to deal with a lot of the challenges of parenting, and they put that on the other parent, and also don't want to admit that a child may have, struggles or may not be able to do something, and have unrealistic expectations of what their child is supposed to do. If they hear their friend's child is doing something, they may be 8 or 9 months older, but still in the same grade, they think their child should be able to do the same thing, and disproportionately punish or neglect if they don't. So they're only there to see the trophy. Next. I'm sure nobody's ever seen a self-centered parent. And those are the parents that expect their children to be there to meet their needs, to clean. You see that even more with kids that are adopted. I saved you, so you owe me, or with foster children. But basically people that have, kids so they can take care of them and do things, and they expect the kids to basically be little servants and just go get me a beer, go go tell the neighbor this, go tell your parent that. They're basically, the kids are basically there to serve the parent, and not for the parent to be there for the kids. And when you're talking to parents in mediation, you can really get a feel, the way they talk about their children, which one of these parents, they are. I mean, this isn't to label people or to put them in a box, but it's really kind of giving you a little bit of information as far as helping you look at the whole picture, not just the relationship between the parents, but when you're looking at parenting plans, and when you're looking at what's going to happen after the divorce is over, and the way these kids are going to be treated, you want to really have a better understanding of what type of parent this parent is going to be. Next. Okay, this one, I'm sure you've never seen this one either. I don't know why I even bother putting it up here, but the manipulative parent, who often blame their partner and their kids, for anything that goes on or that goes wrong, it's going to basically be my way or the highway. And if you don't do it my way, a lot of these manipulative partner parents basically, as partners, these are usually the ones that call their partner a narcissist right away. Because as soon as you don't do one thing that I want, then you're a narcissist and you're controlling my behavior. If you don't do what I tell you or what I want you to do, then that means there's something wrong with you and you're controlling and you're abusive and you're a narcissist. We see that a lot of times. You know, one of the things I tell clients all the time is that I see blame as responsibility plus judgment. That's my own little equation. I've made it up, you know, but I think when people don't take, and partners don't take responsibility for their behavior, then they want to blame the partner. When you point the finger at somebody else, you still have free pointing at yourself. And so they take no responsibility, so they blame the partner for whatever's going on. And it's really confusing for kids. And then maybe these same parents, or, you know, different parents, also are manipulative because they, back in the day, we used to call them Disneyland dads. You know, they were the fun parent and they would try to bribe the kids and manipulate them to feel good. So you basically have team mom and team dad, and it becomes almost, I don't want to call it a sport because I want to throw up on myself, but, you know, where, you know, it's these two teams and who's going to win. And one parent wants to win over the other. So they basically bribe or will do things, you know, how often have you seen somebody get a dog that doesn't want a dog, but they do it to make sure, you know, because the kids always wanted a dog, and one parent, so I want to go to dad's house, I want to go to mom's house, they have a dog, and, you know, I want to go be with the dog. And it's not because they really want a dog. They're doing different things to manipulate both their partner and the children. It's not just out of healthy, loving parenting. Next. This is the ability to perform well, observation. You know, in life, we call this, you know, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. We've seen it, you know, a lot. We see it a lot with abusive partners, that, you know, the biggest red flag is they're one person in private and somebody else in public. But years ago, when I first started doing this, after I was in domestic violence, when I was working with the dependency system and did a lot of work with family violence and child abuse, I learned about something called the Hawthorne effect. And what the Hawthorne effect is research that says that behavior will change even with no intervention, just because they know somebody's watching. So what I did at the time is I would go into the houses and I would work with the families where there had been abuse, so the kids didn't have to go into the system. A lot of times the abusive parent or partner was removed from the home, but working with the rest of the family, and sometimes the abusive parent separately, so that the kids didn't have to be removed, as long as that could be safe. And one of the things that was found, that the families behave better just because they knew I could show up at any time, and somebody was watching, they were on their best behavior. So the families were safer while I was coming in, even if I never opened my mouth. I didn't have to teach them anything in the beginning, but just by being there, just because somebody was watching, means that they're on their best behavior. And you see it a lot with clients. Again, if divorce papers are filed and somebody's attorney says to them, well, you know, be careful with your email, there's going to be a paper trail and you're going to have this, all of a sudden the behavior that you're seeing after things are filed may be very different than the behavior that they're used to seeing. Okay, go ahead. You can go to the next one. We see this a lot, undermining the other parent and using the kids against, you know, him or her. I don't have to explain this. This pretty much explains itself, but where one parent will say to the kids, no, you can't have dessert, and the other parent brings home chocolate chip cookies with ice cream, and basically saying, well, I know, dad said that, but I know you worked hard today, so you can have it anyway. But it's not done only because parents have different parenting styles, although that does happen, and it happens a lot. And the biggest blessing we can do is teach parents how to be on the same page and why that's so important, or at least reading the same book. We see a lot of parents that aren't even reading the same book, let alone being on the same page. But this is different than that. This is specific manipulative behavior where it's to undermine the other parent, to basically say, that parent, you don't listen to mom or dad, you listen to me, because I'm the one who makes the rules in this family. So if I say it's okay, it's okay. It doesn't matter what the other parent said. Again, this is, you see in the pattern, everything's about control here, and it's about winning and being large and in charge. If you think about, bullying, it's basically family bullying. It's not basically, it's exactly. Okay, next slide. I want to talk a little bit about the victim of as a parent, because a lot of times, there's a lot of stigma, and people don't really understand, some of the victim behavior as a parent, and thinks that some of the behaviors are more complicit in a codependent than a controlling way. The idea that, a lot of times a victim will go along with their partner. And again, it's important to remember that cooperation is very different than free will consent. A lot of times they go along with the partner because they're afraid of, if they don't, that the partner will get upset and take it out on them, him or her, or on the children. So it's not necessarily that just because they're going along means that they agree. It might mean that they're afraid of what will happen if they don't. And again, that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be physical violence. It may be yelling or screaming, or the silent treatment, or doing something that they're afraid will have a negative effect on the kids. That the abusive partner keeps the secret. One of the things, when divorce comes and there's been a lot of control, and again, whether or not there's been physical violence, but one person really doesn't have a voice in a relationship and doesn't say anything and is afraid, and then all of a sudden may say something, we think, well, they just want a leg up. Sometimes that's true, and which is again why we have to look at the whole picture. But sometimes people don't say anything. Those are the ones that are really afraid. The ones that come in large and in charge and tell you, well, my partner's abusive and they did this. Somebody that's really afraid is not gonna be throwing words, all that stuff, all over the place, especially if their partner is right there, because they're afraid of the consequences. So you have to read between the lines. One of the ways you can tell, and it's probably a little more difficult on Zoom, but if you have seen the attorneys, or even looking at the attorney, if somebody's afraid to answer a question without looking at a higher power, like their partner or their attorney, or perhaps you, the mediator or the arbitrator, they look at somebody else to make the decision, always have their head down, or always saying that they're sorry. That's a big red flag for somebody that's afraid. And one of the things, and I've been that girl 100 years ago, because integrity is everything to me. And I get very offended, or used to, I don't anymore, with certain things I understand, when somebody lies to me, because I take it personally, either that they think I'm an idiot or they don't trust me, or, just lying is, I think lying, it can be the Antichrist. Lying and judgment, two of my least favorite things. And a lot of times when victims lie, they're lying not only to protect their partner or because they're liars, but because they're afraid if they tell the truth, something's going to happen to them or to their children, or that their children are going to go into the system. A lot of times their partner has said that you can't take care of the kids, so if you divorce me or if you do this, then you're going to lose the kids. And they're so afraid of telling the truth because they're afraid that they're going to be punished and the children potentially could get hurt or they'll get hurt. So know that sometimes if somebody's truly been victimized, they're lying not to disrespect you or to be mean or deceitful. It's about survival. And I think sometimes we have to give people a little bit more grace and really think, if I was afraid for my life and, didn't know and had been isolated from my support system, and, I really want to get out of this relationship, or I'm in a situation and, I don't tell the whole truth, please don't punish the person for that. Again, there are some people that are just manipulative and liars, and sometimes it's hard to tell the difference, but try to look at the whole picture and give somebody the benefit of the doubt. If potentially you think there truly has been some type of victimization. Next slide. Oh, I don't know what happened to the first couple. Again, they take the blame for the family problem. It's okay. Well, they might have been, I was working on it when the internet was out. They take the blame. A lot of times, one of the ways you can tell who the victim is they take the blame for situations. They take responsibility because, one, they're either blamed so often that they believe that it's their fault, or two, they don't want to be punished or they don't want the children to be punished. So they're going to take responsibility for anything that happens in the family. Again, they'll take the blame because somebody else won't take, the abusive partner won't take responsibility. A lot of times a victim will make sure that their kids are staying with somebody or away from home. One of the reasons that that victims will stay in an abusive relationship and won't get a divorce is because in Florida, we have 50-50 parenting, and that you can't go more than 50 miles from the abusive partner, so they can be with the kids. And a lot of times victims truly believe that they're protecting their children by staying, because if I'm there, then I can protect my children. If I leave, that 50% of the time, my kids are going to be with this person that's going to be abusive to them and hurt them, or be with a new partner, and they're going to have to watch it, and I can't protect my children, or I can't talk to my children. I remember a woman saying to me, she had a 2.5-year-old little girl, and she was the primary parent and did, pretty much all the parenting, and then, got a divorce, and her husband had their daughter 50% of the time. And she said to me, Laura, I never thought when I had a baby, I would be a part-time parent. And I'm sorry, just got chills. She's not a part-time parent. She's a full-time parent. But, a lot of times people believe they're going to be a part-time parent, and that half the time, especially when they have a controlling partner, when they get a divorce, their partner won't let them have access to the kids through FaceTime or whatever, or they have cameras in the room, or they, you know, taping all the calls, or they're sitting there when they're FaceTiming, so they can't have an unwatched conversation with the other parent. They next, you know, will reason with the abusive partner and challenge their behavior. I don't know how often they really challenge the behavior, because again, they're afraid of being punished. This number 8 is really important. We talk about self-medicating, and we know a lot of times victims of all sorts of stuff, struggle with drug and alcohol problems. They self-medicate with drugs and alcohol. We used to see a lot of alcohol. Now we're seeing all sorts of other stuff. You know, a lot of with the younger people, we're seeing wake and bake. They have medical marijuana cards, and they're smoking from the time they get up to the time they go to sleep. But one of the other things is that a lot of times a victim, even when the kids are home, will go out and get their partner drinks. And we see it a lot with alcohol, so I'll use that, where they basically just want him to pass out because he or she may be drunk. But once they pass out, they know that they're out for the evening, and then the victim and the kids will be safe. So you think, well, if you're afraid of them when they're drinking, if they're abusive when they're drinking, then why are you giving them alcohol? Well, once they pass out, then I feel safe. Then my kids are safe. I do want to talk about, you know, while we're on the alcohol, I want to see what time it is because I never pay attention. You know, that people are only abusive while they're drunk or high, not because they're drunk or high. The alcohol just removes the filter, and they're more likely to not think about the consequence and the lethality and how dangerous they are go up because they're not thinking of the consequences. But people that may only be physically violent when they're drinking, but generally they're emotionally and mentally abusive and controlling when they're not drinking, but it's a lot easier to blame the alcohol on the violence than the partner. Next slide. Sorry, I'm used to these my time. A lot of times the victim will endure the physical violence, the battering, because they believe as long as the abusive partner isn't hitting the children, then the children aren't being affected. And you can say to me, Laura, that's ridiculous. And I would tell you, I agree. But how often do we see in Lee County, we've had so many murders where kids have found the parents or been their little children. I can think of 3 as I'm saying this. And what did they say in the paper or on the news? And the children were not harmed. Really, this 2-year, I remember the one with the 2-year-old member with the phone walked in and allegedly called 911 and had blood and found the mom dead, but all the news reports said the child was not harmed. When a parent kills the other parents, a child is harmed, period, end of story. We talked about self-medicating, the escapism, the disassociation. You know, a lot of times when you're working with a victim, maybe in mediation, you get maybe a little bit annoyed, maybe a lot annoyed because they seemingly aren't paying attention, you know, kind of looking at the birds and, you know, say maybe they have ADHD, but really a lot of times they could be associating, almost leaving their body because it's too painful to be in the situation, and they can't deal with it and don't feel like they can leave because I love you to death. And even if they're trying to leave the situation, how many of us know of divorces that have taken 5 or 6 years because they use the legal system as a way to continue to control the partner? And post-divorce abuse is a thing we could even do a whole other training on that, where just because you're divorced, especially when you have kids, but even when you don't, you know, that's a whole other thing. But the disassociation to professionals that are trying to help them often are looked at as disrespect or not paying attention. It's basically a natural trauma response. It's not disrespectful. And again, sometimes abused people that are victims in abusive relationships will overly punish the children, you know, and do things more severe than they believe is true, because they believe, whether or not it's true, they believe the perception is, as long as the abusive partner thinks it's enough, then they won't do worse to the children. So I may, spank them with my hand, even though I don't believe in spanking, because if my partner does it, then he or she is going to use a board or a switch or, something else. So I can say, yeah, I whooped them, or yeah, I hit them, I spanked them, because they're afraid if the partner does it, that the kids will be hurt worse. And the difference between corporal punishment is legal in Florida. There's a whole different, thing for kids that grow up where might is right and domestic violence and corporal punishment. But that's a different training. But the difference between corporal punishment and abuse, separate from, again, the legal definition of leaving a bruise, is, spanking a child or discipline is trying to correct an inappropriate behavior, where it becomes abusive when a parent takes their anger out on the child and goes beyond just correcting an inappropriate behavior and really hurts the child, or is trying to control the child in more than just a corrective way. It's, again, I'm large and in charge, and you didn't do what I told you. And so the parent takes it personally. I told you to do this, you didn't do, you didn't obey me. And so the child is punished, and the parent is angry because he or she wasn't obeyed, and not just because of the inappropriate behavior. Next slide. We've seen, and I've worked a couple of, actually, I was working as an expert for the state attorney in a case where a woman participated in a criminal activity where it was a drug deal gone bad, and somebody was killed. And they basically said it was battered spouse syndrome, which it wasn't. I mean, she didn't meet the criteria. And just because somebody's been a victim of domestic violence and, they kill somebody, doesn't mean they meet battered spouse. But a lot of times they will do criminal activity because they're less afraid of the police, or, of the potential consequences of doing it, than what their partner will do. Uses force against CP, and a lot of times, the reactive abuse, there's a lot of thoughts about that different way, that a lot of times will use excessive force defending themselves against an abusive partner. And a lot of times, they stay in abusive relationships because the most dangerous time for a victim is when he or she leaves. And if you're doing mediation, if you're doing divorce, if you're just talking to somebody that's thinking about leaving, safety planning is critical. Because I've worked with a number of people that had never been hit, actually 3, and very wealthy. 2 of them were exceptionally wealthy, 1 not so much, that had never even been physically touched. And then when they said they were going to get a divorce, their partner burned down, their husband, actually they were all husbands, sorry, burned down the house. And 1 actually got white gas, because who knew gas came in colors, because it's more flammable. So he said if she were to sign these divorce papers, then he was gonna use this white gas that he put a line from where they were standing all the way to the house and all over the house, and light a match. So sometimes when you're talking to people, you need to know, and they tell you they're afraid, or if you think they're afraid, then sometimes creating a safety plan is really important. And sometimes even suggesting, what's more important, this dresser or this little bit of money, or just giving the partner what they want, and that your safety is more important. Or I worked another case. The guy was a doctor, and he got $6 million and all the kids, and she got nothing in the mediation, and the mediator signed off on it, and she had to move to California, and he made her move to California, all the way away from the kids. And then basically told the kids all this stuff about her, and she went and got therapy for a year and then went back. But at the time, she signed away the kids, signed away everything, because that was the only way he was going to let her leave. And she needed to be safe, and she believed the kids would be safe with him physically, and then she came back a year later for the kids. So if somebody's disproportionately saying they're going to give up everything, there's probably something else going on. Even if they're willing to leave their kids, sometimes because a lot of times they believe that the kids will be safer if they're not there, because the abusive parent will think they won because they got the kids, or they just want the kids because the other parent really wants the kids. They don't want to parent the children. They just want them because they're their property, or they do it to punish the other parent for leaving because they adore their children, and the biggest way to punish them is with them. Go ahead. I know I'm running out of time, so you'll get a copy of this. So go past these. I just want to talk real quick about injunction, no contact order, restraining order. A lot of times people use them interchangeably. They're not. An injunction for protection or a restraining order, basically the victim has to go and get a no contact order after there's an arrest on a judge orders. But a lot of times, attorneys and people looking at it think if there's, no paper trail, that means that nothing happened. In the criminal world, they say no face, no case. Victims that won't press charges. A lot of times people that are truly victims won't get an injunction because, one, they have to write in the back all the reasons why, they're afraid, which can aggravate the partner and put them in more danger, or can put their kids in danger. So you can't use that to know whether or not there really has been abuse. Paper trails, I understand that the legal system is data driven, but sometimes when we're dealing with safety and survival issues, the paper trail isn't everything. Now, on the bottom, it says written lethality questionnaire will be provided upon request. I created for DCF and for the courts and all sorts of things, a lethality assessment. It's also in my domestic violence book, but if you email me, I'll send you a copy, and then with just the questions, and then another one that explains, how the questions, how the answers really matter, and how it can help you really understand, if there are safety issues, because I understand doing the best for your client and winning, especially, for attorneys, but really at the end of the day, even though, you may not be a mandated reporter, the idea of keeping, everybody safe and really understanding what's going on is really important. So I feel pretty strongly about this, and, I know some of you are mediators. You're also guardians ad litem. I know that the guardian ad litems don't always have clinical backgrounds, I always make myself available. If you have questions, I do consultations for those. If you have safety, reading between the lines, seeing what's really going on. You know, not both. I'm an expert in family violence, not just domestic violence, sexual violence, but really, if you're having trouble really not knowing if the clients are telling you the truth or whatever, you know, please feel free to reach out for help. I think we already had that one. It must be okay. And then I gave you a bunch of resources. The sheriff's department, you can always call the non-emergency number. They have advocates. The domestic violence shelters, not necessarily to stick somebody in a shelter. You probably don't have clients that are going to go into a shelter, or the National Coalition, but they can answer questions. If you need help with a safety plan, with knowing something, with children, with information, you can, you know, always do that. You know, or my website is there. You can always feel free to call me. I return all my phone calls and all my text and all my emails. Sometimes I work till 8:30 at night, so sometimes it's later or the next day, but if it has to be that day, just tell me and I'm on it. I spent a lot of my career kind of being a hotline and you know, responding in 15 minutes or less. I was quicker than getting a pizza delivered. So it's kind of what I do. So I don't know if we have time for a question or two, but I'll be happy to answer any if anybody has any.
Yes, we actually had one in the chat. So I just read it. What does the speaker tell clients when they tell her their spouse is a narcissist? Almost every initial client meeting I have, that is said. I would appreciate some insight on how best to respond when the behavior is not extreme and common bad behavior.
Well, I don't know. I don't know who asked the question. You're probably much nicer than me. My response is just because somebody, well, you can't really say it to a client, but again, just because somebody's a narcissist, I'm sorry, just because somebody's an asshole doesn't mean that they're a narcissist. I would say to them, please tell me, you know, what makes you think that? What makes you say that? What behaviors have you seen? Have they been professionally diagnosed? You know, it's a very significant personality disorder, and narcissist abuse is become a term really for mental and emotional abuse, or even if somebody says something that the other person doesn't like. And it's really difficult because what the true definition of what they're saying narcissist abuse is beyond devastating. So for people that, you know, somebody said something not nice to them, or they didn't get a trophy, you know, or they broke up with them, or they said something to, you know, another person and they cheated, that doesn't make them a narcissist. And a narcissism diagnosis is a big deal. So I would say, let's not worry about the label. One of the things that I always say is labels are for jars. And you know, instead of labeling the person, let's talk about the behavior. What is it this person has done that makes you think they're a narcissist?
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Laura. The presentation was, as always, fantastic. And again, very much appreciate you doing this for us.
It was my pleasure.
And we will circulate the PowerPoint presentation. So don't worry about that. You will also get the information about the CLE CME credits. And what I would like to do is point your attention to our next ADR practice section meeting, which is scheduled for March 21st with actually attorney Alice Ryder. She will discuss elder abuse issues in mediation, so stay tuned for that. And again, Dr. Laura, thank you so much. We will be in contact, and I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon.
It was my pleasure.
Well, thank you so much.